Welcome to Gluten Free Unwrapped, the podcast that takes you inside the stories of the founders, CEOs, and influencers who make the gluten-free industry tick. Whether you're living a gluten-free lifestyle, building a brand, or just love a behind-the-scenes look at how your favorite products came to be, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Jenny Fink, and this is Gluten Free Unwrapped. Today on Gluten Free Unwrapped, I'm excited to welcome Vanessa Phillips, the dynamic founder of Feel Good Foods, a brand that's redefining the frozen food aisle with chef-crafted gluten-free comfort food. Vanessa's journey started with a personal health challenge. After being diagnosed with celiac disease when she was 20 years old, she craved favorites like dumplings and egg rolls, foods that no longer fit her new gluten-free lifestyle. In 2011, she teamed up with her chef partner to launch Feel Good Foods and put those beloved foods she missed back on the table. Since then, she's made gluten-free living feel less like a sacrifice and more like a celebration. And today we get to hear her founder story. So Vanessa, welcome to Gluten Free Unwrapped.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here today. And I want to start at the beginning of your culinary and food journey because I think it's just a fascinating story. So tell me a little bit more about the role of food in your life growing up.
Yeah, of course. Since I was a baby, my parents told me before I could remember that I always was very adventurous with food. I loved food. I have a brother who is a year older than me, and my parents always tell stories about how different we were and how different our relationship was with food because he would always order off the kids' menu, and then I would always want like the most sophisticated dish on, the adult menu. So I always had a very adventurous palate. That just continued as I grew older. I always just found so much joy in cooking and was always very, adventurous in what I wanted to eat. All of my favorite memories as a kid involved food in some way. I used to love cooking with my grandmother and, just for my whole life, like food has just been something that has really brought me a lot of joy.
Now, did your family own restaurants? Is that what I had heard? And tell me more about those experiences.
They did. They owned, so my father owned very fast casual type restaurant concepts in New York City. But that came later in my life. My dad was actually a chiropractor when I was a kid. And then when I was 12, he opened coffee shops in New York. And then that evolved into bagel stores. And then when I got a little bit older, Chinese restaurants. So it's very ironic because growing up, my friends and family would refer to my dad as the bagel king. Always wanted to sleep at our house because on Saturdays and Sundays, our house always smelled like toasted bagels. My dad always had bagels sent over. I don't know if it was like an overexposure to gluten, maybe, but growing up, Chinese food and bagels were always a big part of the menu option in my family. And my parents actually didn't really cook a lot. So we had a lot of Chinese takeout. And I used to say to my mom that I felt that there was something that I was eating every day that was making me sick. And I didn't know what it was. And this was at a time where there was not nearly as much information about celiac disease. So I was like, I don't know, maybe it's salt, maybe it's sugar. I mean, I felt that it was something that was prevalent in every meal. And I used to say to her, I don't even care what I'm allergic to as long as I can keep eating dumplings and egg rolls.
Oh my gosh. Wow. And I think your story is so similar to so many in the way like we eat something we don't feel good and we blame everything but probably the thing that it is
Yeah.
because we don't want to give up bagels, dumplings, egg rolls, all those good things. So these were some of your childhood favorite foods, of course, but fast forward, you're 20 years old and you got diagnosed with celiac disease. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I had celiac for many, many years. I had tons of symptoms throughout my childhood and into adolescence, and they were they included pretty much everything that you can imagine except for gastrointestinal. So my parents, and to their defense, back then, I don't know if I would have, done anything differently with my own child because I never really complained of stomach aches. Not until I got much older. My symptoms were I had a lot of like skin rashes, eczema. I had tingling in my hands and feet to the point where I used to wake up every night in the middle of the night and I would crawl into the bathroom and I would turn on the bathtub because the pressure of the water would have to just run on my feet to wake them up because it was just the numbing
Wow.
was so extreme. And, that's like a very random complaint for, a 11-year-old to make. So I think my parents were very confused and they did send me to doctors, but they never sent me to a gastroenterologist because my issues did not seem to be stemming from my stomach. And then when I got older, like in high school, I had, a lot of brain fog. I was tired, just fatigued all the time. I would come home after school and sleep and then wake up and eat and then go back to sleep. Um, and it was really perplexing. And when I went to college, it got really intense, I would say like my freshman year of college. And I think the reason was because when I was, growing up in New York City, yes, I was eating a ton of gluten, obviously, but the food was, more simple and the more simple ingredients. And, I wasn't eating fast food. I wasn't eating junk food. When I went to college in upstate New York and it was all fast food. I was living in the middle of nowhere in a really small town and it was Wendy's and there wasn't, it was cafeteria eating. And that was when my symptoms really became like just so prevalent. And that's when I started having more like acid reflux and bloating, extreme weight loss, and then extreme weight gain. And the summer after my freshman year of college, I said to my parents, I really think I need to go to a gastroenterologist.
Wow. You had all sorts of symptoms, but then it seems like the final straw were some of those classical celiac symptoms, the gastrointestinal issues. And I definitely feel what you were saying about college. Like I think if people knew how much pizza I ate in college, it would be so gross and so ironic now that
Yeah.
we both have celiac. Okay, so you obviously went to the doctor and probably ran some tests on you and found out you had celiac.
I remember going into his office and I was feeling so defeated. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, but there there were so many times in my life where I felt that I wasn't taken seriously. And also, I think, being a teenage girl, there's, a lot of like mischaracterizations that come just like, oh, neurotic or, sensitive, emotional, right? So like I did go to doctors a lot and feel like I was kind of like they brushed it off and they sort
Mm,
of, would roll their eyes. I actually do remember one time actually seeing a doctor roll his eyes.
wow.
And, so I was second guessing myself a lot. And I went to see this gastroenterologist, and I kind of walked in feeling really defeated and thinking that he was just going to say, I'm sure it's all in your head. And I remember he looked at me and he said, a 20-year-old girl should not be feeling this way.
Mm,
So I promise you, I don't know what the answer is going to be, but I promise you that there is an answer that could get you feeling better than you're feeling. There's no reason for you to be living your life feeling this way every single day. And I started to cry
mm,
because I just wanted to feel seen and
right.
heard. And for, over a decade, I had never had that. So it was just like such a moment for me in my life. And he decided to run an endoscopy. And when I woke up from the endoscopy, he said, okay, so, very preliminary. I, saw the results and I saw a little bit of redness and inflammation, but I think it's just acid reflux. I didn't really see anything concerning. And I felt again like, oh,
Hmm.
like it's all in my head. I knew it. Like I should have like not even bothered going to him. And after the endoscopy, I went away with my family for a week. And then I was going back to college. And when I was away with them for that week, I decided that I wasn't going to eat any bread. And I had never considered cutting bread out of my diet before. I had cut soy sauce out of my diet, and balsamic vinegar because I used to think, and tomato sauce because I used to think it was acid reflux related. So I never
Right.
realized that it was like probably the pasta, not the tomato sauce, or what was in the salad, not the salad dressing. I mean, those were the things that I had already cut out. And during that week when I was away with my family, I couldn't believe how much better I was feeling. It was really crazy.
Wow.
Like I had so much energy and I just was like, wow, like this is amazing. And then when I got back from the week away, the doctor called me and he said, so I did a further biopsy on your lower intestines, and I think you have celiac disease.
Wow.
And he said, how have you been feeling? And I said, oh, no, 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 I can't have celiac disease. That's impossible. I'm so much better. I'm like completely cured. And he said, really? Well, have you been doing anything differently? And I said, no, I mean, I stopped eating bread because I didn't even know what celiac disease was. I was like, I've stopped eating bread and I'm better now. And he said, well, that's interesting because if I'm what I suspect is right, and it is celiac disease, I'm going to tell you that for the rest of your life, you have to stop eating gluten. Um,
Wow.
and he was like, I think that you knew, like you were just super intuitive with your body.
Right.
You got to a point where you were able to figure it out before getting that medical diagnosis. So I went back again the following day. He did a blood test, he did a colonoscopy, but I think, I mean, he already knew that it was celiac. And he gave me the diagnosis.
Wow. That's an amazing story. And I agree with you. I think you intuitively knew what it was. Maybe you were in denial, but you knew what it was. Did you feel like when you finally got that diagnosis that it was a relief, or was it, oh man, I'm gonna have to give up bread and dumplings and all that stuff that you loved?
I don't think it was either. I think it was more just overwhelming because I was very young and I was living in a place that was not accommodating to the lifestyle that I was going to have to lean into. And there just wasn't, I mean, today would be very different. There just wasn't a lot of options. I had to order all of my food online. Everything back then I felt tasted like cardboard. I felt very socially alienated. I was very anxious. About getting sick and what was to come. And, I was getting so many other testing done. I had to get bone density tests and I was still, and it took my body a really long time to heal. I would say like 3 to 5 years before I really felt that I could eat other foods. I mean, because for a while I couldn't have corn, dairy was difficult, so it was a hard time adjusting to being gluten free and just learning about celiac disease. And I think a lot of that was also just due to the fact that brands like Feel Good Foods didn't exist where there wasn't as many options available. So it was definitely looking back, it was a really tough time, but I had to, get really knowledgeable, become my own advocate. That's when I really started cooking a lot. I left the college that I was at and transferred schools so that I could be in a city, and have access to grocery stores. And, it took me in a completely different path in life because as I started learning more about food, I actually started loving food even more than I did
Mm,
before. So it all worked out, but it was very challenging in the first
right.
year.
Right. And I think as a lot of food becomes off limits to us, we start to appreciate the foods that we can have or the foods that people recreate the versions of foods we used to eat, which is again why we all love feel good foods so much. So let's dive a little bit into the beginnings of feel good foods. And I understand at the time your boyfriend, who then later became your husband and partner in the business, he was a trained chef. So he was making you some of these foods you missed. Is that right?
Yes. He and we actually met at a restaurant and I would basically tell him all the foods that I missed and he would make them gluten free. And, he had never cooked gluten free before. And I mean, not in that way, so we learned a lot about gluten free cooking together.
Wow. And he was a chef, right? Or a
Yes,
trained.
yes, yes. He was a chef, yes.
Okay, amazing. And okay, so what were some of the things he was making you that you were like, wow, this is amazing. We need to package this up, you know?
Um, oh my gosh. I mean, so much, so I think the first thing I told him that I missed, which was funny because it wasn't even something I ate a lot as a kid, but was lasagna. And we actually started selling the lasagnas before anything else.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we were selling lasagnas just in New York City because he made the most delicious gluten-free lasagna. And that like quickly became my favorite. And it is funny too when you go gluten-free because lasagna was something like because I said earlier, like tomato sauce was always what I thought such a trigger food. So lasagna was something that I never ate. And then when I had it gluten-free, I loved it. And maybe I would have always loved lasagna, right? But like I had no idea because lasagna was always something I was like so terrified to eat. So to be able to enjoy lasagna was really fun. So yeah, one of the first things he made was lasagna. Obviously, anything breaded, battered, fried. I wanted that like crispy, crunchy experience. So I used to, request a lot of crispy, battered foods. I never gravitated much towards baked goods prior to having celiac. So it wasn't really something that was that difficult for me to give up. So I didn't really crave a lot of cookies or baked products. It was more savory.
Okay. So you were selling the lasagnas, but then you obviously you made some sort of pivot. What happened there?
So we were selling the lasagnas in New York City. And at the time, we also opened Friedman's restaurant together. And when we opened Friedman's, the everything on the menu was available gluten free, and we couldn't do both. We couldn't be making lasagnas and run our restaurant. But I kind of put the lasagna idea sort of on a back burner. I was like, wow, there's clearly, a need for convenient foods for people to be able to bring at home. But at that point, really our business and what we were putting most of our energy into was our restaurant. So I stopped delivering the lasagnas right around the time when we opened Friedman's. And we were really blown away by just the amazing the way the gluten-free community embraced Friedman's. It was at a time where gluten-free was still really fringy in New York City restaurants. And we would have, an hour, 2 hour wait on Saturdays and Sundays. And we had this guest book. And we would ask all the, gluten-free customers to write their email address and where they were from and like leave a note in the guest book, and we would go through the guest book and we saw that we were attracting customers from all over the world that were coming to Friedman's to eat the
Wow.
gluten-free fried chicken or the gluten-free Reuben or the gluten-free fish and chips. And that was really like when the light bulb moment for me was, which is that, we were a 35 seat restaurant inside the Chelsea Market in Manhattan. And, we could be reaching so many more people if we were able to, broaden, our reach. And that was when I started thinking about getting into grocery stores.
Oh, wow. Okay. So what were some of the dishes that you were serving at Friedman's? I didn't realize this part of the story. So you're in this restaurant. What were some of the dishes that were really popular that you're like, maybe this is something that we can mass produce?
So Friedman's is still around today. Actually, there's 8 locations now. When we started Friedman's, it was different than it is today in that, with one restaurant, it was, we did a much smaller menu with tons of specials. And we really tried to keep it very seasonal. Trey grew up in the South, my partner. So he had a lot of Southern influence. And then, we really would take all of our favorites from what I ate as a kid and what he liked to eat as a kid and kind of brought it together to, create a menu that we both felt, incorporated all of our favorite nostalgic childhood
Mm.
foods. So we had from his side, we would do like fried green tomatoes, obviously available gluten free. We did this like catfish sandwich with like a caper remoulade and sauteed collard greens, and we would put it on like a gluten free baguette. That was really yummy. But then we would also like, pay tribute to my childhood, and we would do like a gluten free bagel with like smoked salmon and, cream cheese and capers. Um, we had every sandwich you can imagine, obviously, because it was also primarily a sandwich shop, and all available on gluten-free bread. And we had pot stickers that were handmade that we had as an appetizer on the dinner menu. And, tons of other dishes too. I mean, gluten-free pancakes, fried chicken and cheddar waffles, um, it was mac and cheese. I mean, it really was pretty extensive. But the big piece of it was that everything was available gluten free. There was nothing that you couldn't get gluten free.
You have the pot stickers now. Is that the first product that you were thinking maybe we have something here?
We had pot stickers and meatballs. We had a few different ideas that we thought could work for grocery stores. And then we decided to just, on a whim, take the pot stickers. And this is when we were running Friedman's. We had very little to no knowledge on what it would take to start a frozen food brand. But we had these pot stickers and we put them in a Ziploc bag. And I remember typing up the preparation instructions and just printing it out, like Word document. I had a friend kind of do a mock up of what the packaging would look like if we were to actually launch this. And I, ran over to like a FedEx, Kinko, and they like printed it out for me. And I put some dry ice and I sent it off to Whole Foods, thinking I would never hear back. And then I kept running my restaurant. And, it was just something that I did that I don't even think I told anyone about. And
Was it addressed to just Whole Foods or did you have an actual contact?
no, I had a contact that I had gotten the contact through a friend of a friend. I never met the contact, but I was told like that contact of mine told the regional Whole Foods buyer that we were going to be submitting samples.
Wow. That's so fun. So it's a little Ziploc bag, some
Yeah,
dry
black
ice.
bag,
Dear
dry
Whole
ice.
Foods.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
adorable. Okay, so then they contacted you, obviously. And what was that like?
They said, congratulations on your first placement. That was what the email said.
Wow. It's almost like getting into college or something.
Hmm. It was really exciting. And it was such a pinch me moment. I think I think about it a lot actually, because it was the only time in my career that I truly cried happy tears.
Wow. I
Yeah.
bet. So did you got this congratulations email from Whole Foods, and obviously you just sent it in a plastic bag. Were you like, "Oh my gosh, what am I going to do here? I don't even have a brand. I don't have packaging. I don't even know what the name of my company is." Like what
We
was
did
going through
know the
your
name
head?
of our company. We
You
had the
did.
name of our company. We had a party one night and we invited a bunch of people over to my apartment, and we were naming the company based on the lasagnas. And everyone was eating the gluten-free lasagna. And then we told everybody to write down a name and put it in a hat. And then we were going to read all the names at the end of the night from the hat. And one of the names in the hat was Feel Good Foods. And I quickly trademarked it and thought, yes, this is the name. And I had it saved. And so, I mean, it was for my lasagna, but I, knew one day that my gluten-free food brand would be called Feel Good Foods. So we did have a name, and the pot stickers, at first it kind of seemed like a disconnect because, pot stickers is like very specific and niche, and like a Chinese Asian appetizer, and Feel Good Foods is a bit more, broad. But right when I got the pot stickers into Whole Foods, I knew that I was going to grow this and it was going to become a lot more expansive and include many more foods outside just pot stickers. So, what I loved about the name very early on was that it was a name that I could really grow into, and it really expressed my vision for what this brand would be and mean to people. Very, far down the line from where I started. And that was, to create a line of foods that made me feel good, and that the intention was to make you feel good. And it was always going to be a lot more than just pot stickers.
Yeah. And that is what Feel Good Foods is today. It's like all of these comfort food, classic foods that a lot of us obviously no longer can eat once we have celiac disease. So tell us a little bit more about some of the foods that Feel Good Foods has today, just in case people aren't familiar with your brand.
We have a line of, today it's all frozen, appetizers and snacks and breakfast foods. And it's focused on nostalgic favorites that are made with simple ingredients and that are always gluten free. The foods are really delicious, and the reason I say delicious, different, I look at a lot of frozen food brands and they're not always created and started by restaurateurs or chefs. So very early on, my partner was like, for me to really put my chef stamp on this, I have to feel that I would serve it to my friends that are not gluten free and that I would eat it myself because he's not gluten free. So we set the bar really high very early on. We never tasted our products against products that are gluten free. We always would go to restaurants and we would buy, order regular pot stickers. I mean, I couldn't taste them, and, we would benchmark it against a wheat made pot sticker or egg roll or whatever. So always had like really high standards for ourselves internally. So today, yeah, it's all snacks and appetizers and breakfast foods, and that includes like a wide range of appetizers such as mozzarella sticks, which is definitely a fan favorite. We just launched pizza bagels, which is really exciting. We have jalapeno bites. We have pizza snacks. We have soup dumplings, which is so awesome. And that's like one of our newer lines. Egg rolls. What
Yeah,
am I
all sorts of
saying?
goodies. I
Yeah.
don't know
And
how
then
you
for
do the soup
breakfast,
dumplings, by the way. Like how they're amazing. If you all need to try those.
Yeah, they're so good. I had actually never had a soup dumpling before. Soup dumplings didn't really exist before I went gluten free, so I was on like the same culinary journey as so many of our other consumers were with the soup dumplings. So that was like a really fun innovation process for me as well. And then with breakfast, we've got stuffed bagels, which was something, that was really special to me, given the fact that my dad had all these bagel stores growing up. I really missed a good bagel. And then one of my favorites is the pancake balls.
Mm.
And they really blow my mind because my son eats them constantly and he's not gluten free. I think you would never know. They're so moist. They're everything that I miss about a pancake, but in a gluten free version.
Wow. And I want to go back to the bagels because you grew up with bagels. Has your father had the bagels, the feel good food bagels, and what does he think of them?
I think he has. My family eats feel good foods all the time, and they love it. I think one of the things that's really special about feel good foods, and the best compliment I get, is that a lot of consumers and friends and family, they don't have any dietary restriction and they
Mm.
eat the products. And a lot of consumers buy it and they don't even realize until much later that it's gluten free. And, when I was first diagnosed with celiac, I used to feel like such an outcast. And even when I would go to a restaurant, they had a gluten free menu, I still felt like an outcast. I felt like I was getting a special menu. I'm very shy, so I don't like a lot of attention. And I always would feel embarrassed when I would be in a restaurant. They'd be like, making a big deal out of it and being like, oh, this is what you can eat, this is what you can't eat. And obviously, I want to make sure I never get sick, but I just didn't like all that attention. So one of that was really important for me with Friedmans and with Feel Good Foods is this idea of inclusivity and really bringing people together. And it really doesn't matter like what your dietary restriction is or isn't, to just be able to all gather together around one plate of food and to share it. And that was something that like was so important to me when I was starting both of these businesses. And I think we've been really successful in accomplishing that.
I think so too. And I think people who don't have celiac disease or food allergies in their family, they don't understand that emotional connection we have to food and how food is just a part of everything. It's a part of all of our social gatherings. It's life to us. And so it definitely feels hard when you can't have those foods. So you've made that more inclusive, like you said, and people who aren't gluten-free can also enjoy feel good foods and not feel like they're eating something like cardboard or they're like these really delicious creations. Right. So you're starting this food brand, which is a huge undertaking, but it's also frozen. So there's got to be a lot of challenges involved with that. So I'm curious some of the challenges that you've experienced in both developing, shipping, and all the things that come with running a CPG brand. If you can share some of those with us.
Oh my gosh. I mean, there we've experienced it all. I one time went to hear someone speak and he talked about like the day in the life of an entrepreneur. And this isn't just for a food entrepreneur or a frozen food manufacturer. This is just any entrepreneur. But he said a day in the life is you wake up and you drive to work and you get a flat tire, and then you get to work and you find out that you're getting fired, and then you get home and you see that your house burned down, and it's just like one disaster after the other is literally like all in the day. But then at the end of the day you like win the lottery, right? So it's like this very like up and down life, which is why it's so important to really love what you do, because I think every sign will probably point to a reason to give up. Yeah, we've experienced a ton of hurdles along the way. I remember our first packaging run ever. We we were only in a few stores at this point, but we'd probably printed 30,000 cartons. And we started getting complaints where consumers were saying that the pot stickers were really mushy and that the water wasn't evaporating, which just didn't make sense to me. And luckily at this point, I think it had only shipped out to maybe like 10 stores, but we had all of these other cartons and we were going to be packaging more that week. And I took one of the boxes out of my freezer that I had at home, and I noticed that in the preparation instructions, I forgot to add the line cover pan with lid, which is absolutely imperative when making the pot stickers because the water will not evaporate if there's not a lid on the pan. And I freaked out, and we ended up getting a stamp made, the really big red writing that said cover pan with lid. It was hideous. And then we had to manually stamp 25,000 cartons with cover pan with lid so that we could pack the rest of the inventory.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like a nightmare. But
Yeah.
like you said, the house is burning down. You got to fix it, right? So, um, wow. And then were the retailers pretty forgiving?
Yeah. I mean, we started very grassroots too. So it was a lot of like small independent stores. Um, and we learned some hard lessons along the way. But I think by the time we got into more established stores, we kind of worked out those little kinks. Um, so yeah, I mean, it was really more, I think, of like a design element. As long as we got all of the necessary factual information on there, it didn't really matter, but it didn't look very pretty.
Yeah. Well, and how do you guys have so many amazing products. How do you decide what to come up with next? What you're going to keep, what you might discontinue? How is that process?
It's definitely evolved a lot. I mean, early on, it was very much the foods that I missed and foods that we cooked at home. And we kind of, the inspiration really came from there. Today, we rely a lot on our consumers. And I will say that we have like such a vocal, engaged community, and our consumers, we take all of their requests so seriously, and they do drive a lot of our innovation decisions. It's like we're really there for you guys, right? So, like, what a lot of what we decide to do, we get from the community, and we read every single comment on Instagram. And we get so many emails and letters, and we really rely a lot on the community to drive our innovation process.
That makes sense. Is there been a product that you or the community has wanted that just has not worked out or has been really impossible almost to create?
I'm sure, I mean, there's definitely a lot of complexities. I can't like think of a specific product, but there's definitely a lot of complexities that go into it where we'll have consumers request something and we'll try it and it just doesn't work for so many reasons. It could be that the manufacturers that we work with have different process or allergens where we can't use shellfish or peanuts, or you know what I mean? So there's like layers like that we have to obviously take into account. Um, I mean, yeah, so for sure, like we definitely can't, we're not magicians, like we can't make anything happen. And there are definitely items that I've been able to make at home that they just don't work when we try and scale it. Just like the process, just it's going to be too slow or there's too much waste or whatever. So there's always going to be ideas that might taste great, but they don't really go past that kind of like ideation process.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now you've been building feel good foods for about a decade now, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there it's easy to get burned out, obviously. Like it's a lot on your plate, but is there something that still excites you about your job?
It all excites me. I'm really lucky in that I love what I do. I definitely get a lot of energy around like no surprise, the food. So whenever we launch a new product, that gives that like fuels me so much. I get so excited. I get so excited around the announcement. I get so excited when I see it on the shelf at the store. I'm still there taking pictures. Sometimes I'll like, do some merchandising, and I get really excited when consumers are buying something for the first time, especially when it's a product that they've really missed. And it's such a gift for them to be able to have these foods back in their lives. I I get so much joy when I get, notes from consumers telling me how they're eating feel good foods in their life, whether it's like they have a child who loves it that they're giving it to, or it's for themselves, or, whatever. I just, hearing those stories from consumers makes me feel so good all the time. And I'm always like, just even till this day, like so inspired by how many homes we've reached. I love the idea that, somebody who I've never met before, and, that is our connection. And that's what brings us together, is that they really missed pot stickers, and I really missed pot stickers. So we made pot stickers, and now they can enjoy it again. It's just this like really awesome human connection that I would have never had if I hadn't started this company.
And I don't know that non like gluten-free brands get the kind of emails that someone like you is getting because food is just so important to us and we are constantly left out of the food fun. And so our fans, people in the gluten-free community, they really, really rally around the brands that are fueling them, like feel good foods. So if someone told you today, "Hey, I want to start a frozen gluten-free food brand," what would you tell them?
I would first say make sure you really do, because it's really hard. It's really challenging. And I remember when I was starting out, I asked for a lot of advice, and a lot of people told me not to do it. And I never considered not doing it, not once. And it was because it was so important to me. It was so just in the fabric of my being. I felt that I was born to do this. I was meant to do this. And there was nothing that was going to change my mind. In fact, the more people told me not to do it, the more I was like, oh, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to prove to you that it can be done, because it is really, really challenging. So if somebody came to me today and they said, I want to do it, I would just say, make sure, like, buckle up, get ready, because you're going to have to fight. You're going to have to fight really hard to get the shelf space, and you're going to have to fight really hard to get consumers to find you and know about you. And it's a huge responsibility when you're dealing with food manufacturing and safety. So I would say just make sure you really want to do it. And if you really do want to do it, I would say then yeah, it is going to be the most exhilarating journey of your life. And you're going to have days where you're going to want to give up, and then you're going to have days where you're going to be flying high, and it's incredibly rewarding if you're doing it for the right reasons.
Right. And you mentioned like part of the challenges is getting that shelf space in the grocery store and fighting for that space. How and gluten free is obviously such a niche market too. And when you were first coming out with feel good foods, there weren't a lot of gluten free options. Did you find it a little bit easier to get that shelf space or harder because it was so niche?
The issue with shelf space has kind of always remained the same, which is that there's just not a lot of it. It's usually, one aisle. And then for us, it's one door, it's frozen snacks and apps. You're not, you don't have the same amount of space as you would if you were, produce or cereal and crackers. There's not, you can't go in different parts of the store. So it's not like we can be at the register, or you can't really be moved around, right? So you're just dealing with not a lot of space. And And that's what makes it really challenging. And it's you have to have a freezer available. So, you're limited with where you can go. And also at home, consumers don't have a lot of space. I mean, freezers are typically smaller than refrigerators. So they want to make sure that what they're filling their freezer with is something that they really are going to use and that they want. So you really want to make sure that you're giving the best experience possible by delivering the best product possible.
Right. And did you feel like just in terms of the gluten-free world that like retailers and grocery stores, they wanted gluten-free products, or were they still like, I'm not so sure this is going to sell because it's gluten-free?
I think gluten free has changed dramatically. Um, a decade ago, it had more of a negative stigma than today. I we've worked really hard, and I think we've done a great job at delivering on our promise of, yes, we're gluten free, but really, first and foremost, we are delicious with simple ingredients. And the gluten free is always there, and we have the certification behind it, but it's really not what we lead with anymore. We want to make sure that our community of gluten free consumers know that they can trust us always. But I don't believe that being gluten free, whether you are eating gluten free as a lifestyle choice or you're eating gluten free for a medical reason, I don't think that being gluten free is enough today to get consumers to keep buying your product. I think that you have to deliver on a delicious product. And if it's gluten free, then the gluten free community will keep buying it. But if it's not delicious, I think that we, as a gluten free community, have higher standards for the foods we're going to eat. And you're I don't think that people will continue buying it. So we really do a lot of work behind getting the trust of people that first and foremost, our product tastes really good.
Yeah, and it does. It tastes really good. Great answer. So, are you up for a few rapid fire questions before I let you go?
Sure.
Okay, awesome. So, your proudest moment so far as the founder of Feel Good Foods?
Launching the brand in Whole Foods.
Wow,
That email after sending it in a Ziploc bag.
amazing. That's a great story, by the way. Best advice for someone newly diagnosed with celiac disease?
I would say to focus on the foods that you can eat and just throw out all the foods that you can't.
If you had to eat one feel good food product every day for a year, which one would it be?
Oh, the chicken pot stickers all day. I still eat them all the time. They're always in my freezer.
I have to admit, I'm a little jealous you have a limiting access to them. um, what's one thing you wish you were better at?
Jump rope? Oh, wait. Oh, in business or just in
Either
general?
way, I love the jump rope. You have to go with that.
Okay. Yeah, I really wish I was better at jump roping. I've been practicing lately and I'm trying to learn tricks and it's very frustrating.
Okay, I have to pause. Why jump roping?
It's like I just like added it into like my cardio routine and I've become like super competitive with myself over it. And now I'm like watching all these YouTube videos, learning all these tricks, and I'm obsessed. And I want to get really good, but I'm trying to be patient with myself. I'm just not there yet.
So it's adorable. What is the best part about being a food business founder?
Oh, definitely the consumers.
Best piece of advice you've ever received?
Let me get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Oh, good one. What's one thing people would be surprised to know about you?
I have a photographic memory.
Amazing. Oh,
I always remember what people are wearing the first time I meet them, even like 25 years later.
wow. Well, I don't remember what I was wearing the first time I met you, but it could have been this. I guess I just did laundry. um, we actually spoke last week. That's the joke here. So last one is a question that I love to ask all of our guests. And so I would love for you to name another gluten-free brand that you really admire.
I love Hue chocolate.
Hue chocolate?
Hue, yeah.
Oh, I
HU.
haven't heard of it.
Oh, really? They are a chocolate company. They make chocolate bars, they make gems, they make chocolate covered, you know, nuts, and it's all paleo and like simple ingredients, like no weird ingredients. And I've just been a huge fan of the brand. They started similar time as us, and I've just been a huge fan of them for years and love their chocolate.
Wow, I'll have to check them out. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for
Okay.
the recommendation and thank you for joining me today. I really loved, hearing your story about how you took this love of, comfort food and brought it to the whole gluten-free community and everyone everywhere. So that's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
How can our listeners keep in touch with you if they want to learn more about you or your company?
You can visit us on Instagram, Feel Good Foods on Instagram. And you can email me if you ever want to email me directly. That's fine too. It's just Vanessa at Feel Good Foods. Yeah. Or find
Awesome.
us in grocery stores. That's the best way, is to
Yeah.
experience it yourself. And you can find us at grocery stores all over the country. We're at Target, we're at Whole Foods, and you can also find a list of grocery stores by zip code if you visit our website, which is feelgf.com.
And what's the first product they should try of yours if they had to try just one?
I would say the new product, the pizza bagels, are really exciting to people right now. They just came out and everyone is loving them. They've like quickly gone to the top of the ranking. So, if you liked pizza bagels as a kid, I would definitely encourage you to try that. And then the soup dumplings, if because the Asian snacks are always my favorite. So the soup dumplings, which launched at the end of last year, those are delicious. I can't get enough of them. So I would also say try those.
Amazing. Well, thank you again. And
Thanks.
we look forward to sharing your story. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
This was fun.
Thank you for listening to Gluten Free Unwrapped. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone in your gluten-free circle. You can connect with me, Jenny, on Instagram at GoodForYouGlutenFree, and be sure to check out my carefully curated celiac-friendly subscription boxes at lovemeglutenfree.com. I'll return next week to unwrap more inspiring stories from the people shaping the gluten-free world. Until next time, stay strong, eat well, and remember, you don't have to do this alone.